everyone. I would like to welcome you all to the ceremony of Madalyn Lamont Award for Creative Writing by AUC students. The award is given every spring for English and creative writing in even years as this one, 2022. And for Arabic creative writing in odd years. So the next award will be for spring 2023 for creative writing in Arabic. The award is judged by a committee of 3. This year, the committee was constituted of me, Faryal Ghazzoul, Professor of English and Comparative Literature, and I am the chair of the Madalyn Lamont Award Committee for this year. The 2 members of the Judges Committee are Senior Instructor Gretchen McClue, a faculty member of the AUC Department of Rhetoric and Composition, who is herself a creative writer and author of a collection of short stories entitled Shahrazad's Tooth, as well as a translator of Arabic poetry. Dr. Nesma Idris, the other member of the committee, who is both member of the Judges Committee and a distinguished speaker in this ceremony. Nesma received her MA from the Department of English and Comparative Literature, AUC, and her PhD from Cairo University. She presently teaches in both ECLT department and the arts department. She has published plays in Arabic and English, including one entitled Death of a Salesman Wife, and a collection of short stories in Arabic for which she received a Sawiris Award. She has published a memoir entitled Abi, My Father, about the eminent fiction writer and playwright Youssef Idris. Her autobiographical work entitled Love Story will be published next month by Al Ain Publishing House about her childhood, her literary father, and her artist mother, Raga. You may wonder, who is Madalyn Lamont, in whose name this award is given? Madalyn Lamont was a faculty member in the ECLT department who taught in the freshman writing program and married Thomas Lamont, who was a former professor in ECLT department, and later he was a dean, a UCD. They had 3 children. You can see her projected picture with her twin daughters taken in the early 1970s. Madalyn was born in the early 1940s and passed away in the early 1980s, barely 40 years old when she died after a courageous struggle with cancer. Madalyn is remembered best as a delightful and caring friend to many at AUC. Her special blend of generosity, warmth, and sharp wit was shared freely with others. In a more private form of expression, she wrote poems reflecting a love of life fully experienced. As a mother, wife, and friend, Madalyn honored her commitment to strong creative womanhood. She contributed to the intellectual life of the university community and helped organize an orientation program for new faculty about Egypt, a country she deeply loved. In her honor, her friends made donations for a fund to celebrate in her memory creative writing by AUC students and to invite for the occasion a distinguished woman speaker. The floor now is for Nesma, and the title of her address is Creativity as an Art of Survival.
It's a pure pleasure to be among you here today. It was lovely building, confusing building, as a participant rather than a receiver of great gifts. And a lot of them are among us here today. It's just pure pleasure. That's the unofficial starting of the speech. Let's get to the official. Can you hear me well at the back? All our living truths were once imagined. Civilizations were built via creativity. Hence, working on developing and enhancing the creative process was never a mere luxury. The creative capacity has become an essential existential survivor mode in these defying times. Humanity has been severely challenged and attacked in the past 2 years. The pandemic had grave repercussions on us all. We have all undergone a sense of loss of some sort. Millions of people lost their loved ones. Some lost their jobs. Others lost their assets. A few people literally lost their minds. The pain was profoundly intolerable and suffocating at times, with nowhere to hide and no escape. The world was gradually turning into one big cage, an imprisonment, and no one had the slightest idea where the keys to the lock were. When all else failed, imagination became the ultimate means for survival. Naturally, the psyche needed a breathing space, an unpolluted territory for existence, an escape. Hence, there was an explosion of online therapeutic groups, virtual courses on every skill humanly imaginable. Paradoxically, the shutdown, the melancholy, the despair have initiated a process of self-reclamation. Our priorities, aspirations, and capabilities were and still are being redefined and reassessed in accordance to our capacity in facing the global pandemic situation. We have all been curbing up our genius in these carefully sealed, sanitized masks to be gradually released upon further instructions. Surviving on an eternal mode of posing was unfathomably nerve-wracking for most of us. However, for the creative minds, it was a blessing in disguise, a revelation, a territory for forced means of introspection and analysis. In other words, the creative impulse was allowed to be set free and finally released in 2022, hence the regenesis. As life gets back to being semi-normal, out of this dark, oblivious tunnel, little rays of sunshine are witnessed in an attempt to recapitulate the whole experience and turn it into something poetic and artistic. The pain, the fear, the anxiety, the disappointments, the regrets, the nostalgia were all beautifully braided together and miraculously transformed into artworks. The Madalyn Lamont Award is a unique opportunity for a process of self-rediscovery to all AUC students. It is a means of breaking off and melting down the artificially contrived segregation between the liberal arts and all other fields of study. Interestingly enough, many of the students who applied for the award were from various other departments. I sincerely thank the ECLT department for this ongoing progressive initiative which enhances the core essence of AUC's tutoring philosophy, namely building up the intellectual consciousness of the students. Suggested recommendation: no writing worth reading is ever created without reading. The most resourceful means of attaining inspiration is via reading all sorts of writing. It is highly recommended to all participants that all participants should invest more time in reading. In my own experience as a writer, I have immensely benefited from reading assignments and courses, but went beyond it to enrich my imagination by reading and reflecting on literary works which helped shape my creative imprint. If it weren't for the richness and depth of ancient Egyptian mythology, I would never have been inspired with the character of Sekhmet in my play Explosion. The romantic poets enhanced my imaginative skills and choice of words, which was evident in my short story collection, Heads or Tails. Hemingway's and Idris's short stories trained me on how to be articulate, precise, and daring. Beckett, Pirandello, Mariani, and other dramatists forced me to be powerful, authoritative, and decisive. History books, for instance, are an everlasting well of inspiration. They tell us tales of how people lived and why they perished. In other words, we are all a work in progress, or we are all works in progress. The project is endless. Our joys, sorrows, vulnerabilities, achievements, fears, etc. do not define us, but our choices on what to do with them does. Books contain the necessary information, expertise to guide us to reasonable choices. In other words, reading complements the writer's vision. It is the means by which she or he dwell within other cultures, other languages, and even other realms of existence. It is my profoundest honor and pleasure to be among you here today, celebrating these warriors who are able to survive it all with the most indestructible shield humanity has ever known, namely their words. Congratulations to all winners, and a big thank you to the ECLT department and AUC for celebrating the imaginative talents of our students. اقرأوا لتصحوا.
Thank you, Nesma, for the act of survival and the art of survival. Yes, reading, you can't be creative without reading. This year, the winning entries covered 3 literary genres: poetry, fiction, and drama. The winners will be called upon to present briefly their creative entry and to read a short extract from it. The winners of the first prize, second prize, and third prize are 2 in each categories. We will start calling on them using alphabetical order of first names. So, I call down on first prize, Aya El-Telbasani, graduate student in the Department of English and Comparative Literature.
Hi everyone. It's a big pleasure to be here once again. My submission was a collection of poems, so there isn't much of an introduction to them. I'm just going to jump right in by reading you a few poems. The first one is called Obey. Once upon a rhyme, poetry tucked me into a bed made of crepuscular light and long warm alexandrines. I slept at the edge of one verse and slumbered off to the next. I was confined in a maze of parallel mirrors. I was confined within empty anaphoras. I jumped from line break to line break in search of meaning and landed on my dimly sunlit bed as an allegory of myself. This one's called A Pocket Full of Heartbeats. Let me overload my pockets with your heartbeats, for my thighs feel so unbearably light. I want to believe that I'm walking to the pace of a cluster of palpitations buried in my jeans. I want to feel the fractioned melodies of your heart weighing down my legs and securing me to the ground. But I am afraid that were I to reach in and grab these diced ephemeral sounds, that they would cut me with their sharp edges, or worse, that they would cut me with their absence. I prefer to live in the safety of knowing that your heartbeats are tucked away in my pockets. I prefer to live in the hope that one day a beat may fall out and find a way to my ears like it always finds a way to my pen, pumping a breath of fresh ink into its wilting body and onto the cold and barren page, where I'm endlessly waiting for you to come back. This poem is called My Room of One's Own. In my room of one's own, I take off my anxieties at the end of the day and let them casually lay on one arm of the armchair. I pull out my tears and hang them on the wall of my room of one's own. I leave my thoughts scattered and untidy on the desk, where no one will ever see them. I stack my fears neatly in my library and organize them in alphabetical order. Sometimes I dust the sadness of my couch in hopes of nesting there for a little while. In my room of one's own, I am finally my own. This poem is called The Smell of Time. Have you ever smelled the days going by? They smell like the fumes left behind by time as he runs me by. They smell like the burning hours I spent knitting my first black woolen scarf. They smell like the metal sound of my needles when each the other knocks as they interlace each black knot. They smell like my fear and confusion and each knot gone wrong. They smell like my perfumed sweat as I tried to outrun time to the station where we all want to be. But I'm still in my chair in the same sad coffee shop where time and I met for the first time. I'm still slowly sipping my coffee in fear of missing time if ever again he drops by. I'm still there, waiting for time, spending time, wasting time, until we meet again to pick up where we left off last time, when we were attempting a ceasefire and weaving white flags. But time abandoned me when I saw the smiling creases in the corners of your eyes. It abandons me every night in your arms, then comes back in the morning after you leave. Time is always here when I least need him, and never here when I need him most, when I am with you. There, I smell him approaching. It's our daily meeting. My half-empty cup of coffee is nearly cold. This poem is called I Cannot Touch the Canvas. I cannot touch the canvas, lest it infects me with its secrets, that it breathes within its weaves. The canvas is threading my lips a color, like a soothing stoic cloud rising between the grief and the muse. The thread is but a silent, unending sea, and my lips falter without a splash. Only I can hear the splash of tickling words, enclosing time into a lost velvet perfume. I spray myself with time, but the fragrance escapes me as eagerly as it does the bottle. So I tell myself, perhaps time is better off tucked away between the pages of my books. Or perhaps it's better off when I spit it out on the canvas. You see, my lips have always been dripping with time, ever since I drank eternity from yours. This is the last poem. It's called Homecoming. I am locked out of my home. I have the keys, but I can't find the right door. Where is home? I'm tired of sleeping in the mud of my thoughts. I am not whole. I am always missing from myself, and home is always missing from me. Or am I missing from it? Is it out there missing me? Is there a cold bed I used to warm that is looking for me? Are the shapes of my thoughts engraved in a pillow somewhere? The cold is penetrating my soul through the hole where home used to sit like an unyielding pharaoh. My coal black hair still carries the smell of it, but my heart is in exile from a home it's never known. Home is dallying on the tip of my Arab tongue. I am afraid it might jump. I write. There's a glimpse of home in my words. I count the words in all my poems, but there are no numbers and no home. This fleeting sense of belonging, I cannot grasp it. It won't have me. Yet my knocks are still reverberating through time, still falling on wooden mirages, still waiting for the day they hit the cold marble and escort me home. Thank you.
Next we have first prize, Noor Tarabeer. Junior, double majoring in English and comparative literature and graphic design.
Forgive me, I'm a bit awkward in these things. My submission was a short story, and it was a reimagining of the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice. For those who don't know it, the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice was an ancient Greek myth about a musician who goes into the underworld to bring his lover back to life. But he can't look back at her, or else she'll stay behind. In my short story, it's reimagined as a refugee going back to his war-torn homeland to bring his fiancée out. But he can't look back either. So I will read a short excerpt from the story, and I hope you'll enjoy it. You must remember one thing, the messenger said gravely, staring into his eyes. You must not look back. I don't understand, the musician said. You will, the messenger said. Cryptic advice from a bitter old man, thought the musician, shaking the words out of his mind. He knew that the messenger must have been in the smuggling business, since the war had broken out, and he must have seen his fair share of horrors. It was only natural that that sort of thing could break at him. The money he had left after the bribes and preparations barely covered the plane ticket. He was 250 euros short, the messenger told him. The musician owned nothing of value, nothing at all. He went to a pawn shop the next day and sold his violin for 200 euros. The last 50 would come from what remained of the month's stipend from the scholarship. He watched the pawn shop owner carefully place the old violin into its case, gave one last look to its dark mahogany wood, to the dust scattered underneath the bridge, to the rosin powder still clinging to the book. That violin had belonged to his grandfather. It was all he had left of the homeland, of himself. It was worth countless euros to him. It had been his ticket to Vienna. It is my ticket back home, to her, he told himself, watching the pawn shop owner zip the violin case shut. When she is safe with you in Vienna or Paris or wherever else, you can start over, make a new life, buy 1,000 new violins. But not that violin, a voice countered, and he silenced it. It was his grandfather's. What is a musician without his instrument? He was now just a man. The man silently gave the 250 euros to the messenger, and they went together to the airport, boarded the plane, took their seats. The messenger gave him a wary look. Who is this girl, and who has you scrambling back to that hellhole? He'd half grumbled. Objectively, the man knew that there was nothing inherently special about his fiancée. She was a normal woman in her late 20s with no remarkable gifts, talents, or beauties. But when he closed his eyes, he could picture her smile, and with it the smell of fresh leaves, and the warmth of the sunlight on his shoulders, and the safety of being at home. She loved their home, and all those years ago she had promised to wait for him, to conclude his studies abroad and come back to her, so they could build a life together. That dream would never be now, for there was no life in the land of the dead, and their home had become. But maybe it could evolve into a new dream. A sadder dream, but a safer one. How could he describe her? She was his home now. They had to be each other's home now. What was a man without a home? She is all I have left, he finally said to the messenger, and that answer seemed to be good enough. Through the flight, the customs, the drive to the refugee camp, the man got through it by closing his eyes and picturing her. He knew she must have changed since he left, but his imagination couldn't conjure up a picture of her that differed from the one he last had of her. Standing alone in the sunlight on a beaten earth road, veil blowing in the wind, eyes sparkling in the sunlight, waving goodbye to him as he drove away. She was life itself. How could he leave her to rot among the corpses? That thought was what pushed the rising fear and anticipation into a tiny ball lodged in the man's heart like a bullet.
Second prize, Muhammad Salid, graduate student in the Department of English and Comparative Literature.
So good afternoon, everyone. Congratulations, colleagues and film winners. Thank you as well for the Madalyn Lamont Committee. My submission was a play entitled "It's Okay Not to Be a Pride," Engineer Youssef. This all started when I read an article about French men getting on andropause. I was puzzled by the term. I started researching and looking what it's all about. And then I started thinking what it would be the case if it happened for an Egyptian god. And so andropause simply is a decline or a decrease in the levels of testosterone, which affects ultimately sexual performance of men. So my protagonist, Yusuf, when he learned that he would not be sexually functioning while he's not yet 40, he was puzzled. Should he tell his wife? Should he talk with a friend or tell a member of the family? And then he decided to face it upon the advice of his mother, because mothers always know, even though he hasn't told her exactly what was the issue. So I'm going to read an excerpt of the play. So this is the moment when the doctor told him what he suffers from. Yusuf's son, your testosterone level is far below average, 480 nanograms per deciliter. The symptoms you have: heavy breathing and memory loss, in addition to your blood results, so that you reach andropause. Pardon? No, my wife doesn't have menopause, doctor. I'm not talking about your wife. I'm telling you that you have andropause. Come on, doctor. I'm telling you that I'm no longer menstruating. What are you telling me? Engineer Youssef, andropause is a sexual dysfunction that happens to men, the equivalent of menopause for men. It has nothing to do with age. I know that you're almost 40. 39, next month. It doesn't matter. I'm sorry to tell you that you will be less functioning sexually. But it's not possible, doctor. What is that which is not possible? You know that I have a 2-year-old paternal uncle? Pardon? My grandpa, may his soul rest in peace, get him at the age of 79. And so that means that it's nonsense that my 70-something grandpa would be having a son while I'm just 40. I totally understand your frustration, Engineer Youssef, but you have to deal with it and prepare yourself for the worst case scenario. Thank you.
Second prize, Yumna Niazi, graduate student in the Department of Arabic and Islamic.
Thanks I have to give to my professors in the ECT department as well as the metric department for what they have done and their contribution to my education for the past 4 years before embarking on my MA studies both in the Department of Arabic and Islamic Civilization Studies as well as in tackle teaching Arabic language. And therefore I consider my entry in the Madalyn Lamont Award submission to be some kind of a return, maybe as a prodigal daughter to the ECLT department once again. So, surprisingly, my piece, which is a short story piece, is entitled Homecoming, much to my delight as Aya's poem, but this here is in prose, obviously. And just a simple synopsis about this piece. I owe the conception of this short story to the city of Alexandria, which I believe have always had an indelible mark on my imagination, and therefore I consider this to be some kind of a homage to Alexandra. So here we go. Picture this. You call it a day and leave with half the day off. As you flee the office and down into the furthest street, you think of how you just survived another day in the grind. You're about to slip into frustration, knowing this will be all upon you by tomorrow. But as you console yourself with the image of the waiting AC at home, its hum lulling you to sleep, you let the dread of tomorrow evaporate. But so do your body fluids. You're down in the street. You're oppressed with the July gust of heat, and you think to yourself, it's like jumping from the frying pan into the fire. You realize then you'd better be faster than dehydration, so you start weighing your options. Although being stranded in Midan Saad al-Nur with all its midday hyperactivity will only curb you from catching the nearest microbus, you're sure that once you dive into one of those afarit al-asfal, the breakneck speeds will make up for you. You'll be home, though not entirely safe and sound, but you will be home. At the end of the day, that's what matters. All set, move. You start first by maneuvering the idle window shoppers as they peer at what appears to be Denise. You overtake them as you are about to round the Pantheon-like Chamber of Commerce. But no sooner do you revel at how nimble your legs are, than you accidentally stomp onto a farsha, whose guy is selling Adidas slippers for way too much for fakes. For a brief moment, you look down at your own black polished shoes and remember that yours too were criminally overpriced for fakes. This leveled comparison slows you down as you glimpse the guy turning towards you, probably thinking you are interested in one of his flip-flops. You decide to ignore him as you start picking your way through the other farshas, crowded with other guys and hagglers. Almost there, you can see the line of the corniche. This pumps you up as you near your last hurdle, another Greek-named cafe whose chairs are scattered all around the sidewalk. You and your nostrils have to zigzag your way through the shishas and their scented varieties, and your legs cannot stop bumping into heavy luggage. Whether to take a break from their summer pilgrimage or enjoy the ear-splitting symphony of the surrounding honks, the luggage owners shoot you dirty looks, irked at how some frantic man disrupted their idyllic sunbath. Although you feel the weight of their gazes, you don't even half as look at them. Not because you are in a hurry, but because it only takes the expert eye of a full-fledged Alexandrian to know who they are. Seasonal visitors. Even amid the rush, you will not deny yourself the disparaging remark. Are almost there. You imagine seeing the corniche with the microbuses lining up close by the Cecil Hotel garage. The trip home wouldn't be any faster, would it? You think half-pleased to yourself. But just when you are ready to catch your breath from the exertion, it gets knocked out of you. What appeared for a split second to be a nostalgic corniche image jumping out of the 50s must have been a mirage playing a trick on your brain, tantalizing ever more your wishful thinking. For what you are bombarded with now is the sight of the corniche, all movement ceased, as it is stuck in one big tailback. The vehicles were irresponsible vapors mingling with the Mediterranean's salty humidity, turning the sight into one of hazy chaos. Beach-goers with slumped umbrellas over their naked backs saunter nonchalantly between cars, as peddlers swarm around, selling their specialty of figs topped with flies with the very naked backs. Alexandria is at its zenith, and you should have seen it coming before making any promises of coming home at this ill-fated hour. You check your wristwatch. Soon it will be 1:30 in the afternoon. You might as well have stayed in the office and endured the stale stench of smoke and ages-old furniture, or maybe the Saray's persistent odor of dry sweat clinging to him. Ah, poor man, you're about to think. But no, you won't think of the office now, not of its daily drudgery, and least of all, its assemblage of nauseating smells. You grit your teeth as you are drenched all over, although it defiantly stands a couple of buildings away as if daring you to part with it. You are bent on leaving behind the office, the Midan Saad al-Nur, and the whole bustling Corniche area, even if it would take you crawling on fours. Then it hits you. This last thought of crawling gives way to your only course of salvation, awaiting another sprint back at the Rome station. The tramway has always reminded you of some tacky mythical creature, with front lights gaping like a dying fish, the steadiness of a waddling penguin, and nimbleness of a tortoise. Surely the tram lacks the agility of centaurs or the sturdiness of sphinxes. Yet you cannot afford not to make a change of tactics and wager on the tortoise in its race with the rabbit. Hopping back all the way again, but making sure this time not to pass by the Persia guy, lest he thinks you had a change of mind about his Zenubas, you closed in on the run. You know this, since you can hear the metal screech of some trams coming to a well-earned rest after their odyssey around Alexandria. Thank you.
Third prize, Jana Bassett, a sophomore majoring in anthropology.
Hi, my name is Jana, and before I read my excerpt, which is from a short story, I want to give you a brief background about how I wrote it. So as a child, I was a very avid reader. Every time a family friend or a family member would try to get me a birthday gift, they'd buy me stacks and stacks of books. I would read the books very, very quickly, and afterwards I'd get really sad because I'd gone through them very fast. And I started to write in my little notebooks, mimicking the style of the books that I read. So my introduction to writing was kind of an extension to my reading as a child. But as I got older, writing became a very cathartic act for me, where I would sort out my thoughts and explore my feelings through journaling. But I put creative writing on the back burner as I stopped reading. But then when the pandemic hit, I found a retreat in reading again. And through reading, I found my way back to writing. And this is one of the first creative writing pieces I've written in years, so it's not perfect. But something that I attempted to do this time was try to find my own style, especially to write about Egypt, because as a child I would mimic stories from the West. So this is something that I wanted to explore. I'm going to read it very shortly. This story is about a guy called Ketem, and it's very, very briefly verbally. I'd been roped by none other than Gamila into entering a tiny Zametic bookstore on our walk to the studio. With a heavy guitar on my back and my long hair making the heat unbearable, I wanted nothing more than to leave. The store was small and overflowing with stacks upon stacks of books. The shelves were too full to contain them all, so they resorted to lining the haphazard stacks on the dusty ceramic floors. Floors that reminded me of my old high school, patterned in amorphous, colorful shapes, embracing the grounds of every shapely apartment building and government institution in Cairo. Some of the stacks were leaning against a clear glass counter filled with every stationery item I'd begged my mom to buy me as a gift. I'd pull her thin hands around the large stationery shelves she'd bring me to before the start of the school year, willing her body to move towards the display of rubber shaped into intricate designs with all sorts of pastel desserts. She'd run her hands through my golden waves, styled them like they are now, hitting right below my chin and covering my head in clumps and not strands, and tell me I could pick one for me only if I got one for Ahmed ibn Tawib. Behind the glass counter stood a disheveled old man fingering the dial on a tabletop fan, the only source of air in his very room. His white beard was magnificent. As someone who'd been trying, unceremoniously failing to grow a beard since puberty, I looked at the heavy mass of blinding hair covering his face in awe. He heard the pretty melody of the wind chimes signaling our entry and looked up from the broken fan to call out, "Amira, he's a day وصلت وانتي لسه جوه." When we told him it's no bother, that we're just looking around, he flashed an apologetic smile and said, "انتوا عارفين بقى البنات ودلعهم، هي كده من صغرها أميرة." Pissed off by the man's comment, Jamila pushed past me and bent over a stack of books labeled in tiny font Shar Alam. As she looked through the books, out came Emily, pulling the strings of beads that separated the store from the back room apart. Her hair was dark, cropped close to her head with a bowl cut much shorter than mine. She wore a long black dress dotted with tiny clusters of pink and white flowers, its sleeves sitting right above her slender wrist. "Ahogiti abobo, ¿verdad?" Her voice was deeper than I expected, raspy and dark. Immediately I wanted to ask her to sing. She bent down beside Yamida and complimented her girls, asked her if she was looking for something specific. I stood behind them, weighed down by my guitar, and my eyes immediately found Amida's wrist, covered in soft dark hair and encircled by thick braids in blue, pink, and purple. The friendship bracelets our teachers would force us to make during summer school. My vision lingered on the calluses decorating her fingertips. They looked just like mine, scars collected from years of playing the instrument on my back. I almost asked her if she played, but I bit my tongue. We were already late for the studio, and Amira's father kept sneaking glances at me, making sure I wasn't near his daughter. All I could think about while playing was her. I'd always retreat to my head while holding the guitar, try to remind myself where my fingers should go, notice what missteps occur when I get too preoccupied with the stunts somewhere in the middle of the studio. But that day, my fingers were on their own. I envisioned her in that black dress standing in my face. What chords would she play if she were me? I imagined it was her fingering the strings, played that whole session as a me. Thank you.
Last but not least, Yasmin Ar-Rahman, senior majoring in business administration.
Hello, everyone. Hopefully, best for last. No, I'm just kidding. Everyone here I'm so absolutely honored to be standing here with everyone that is very well deserving of this wonderful award. All of your written works are absolutely spectacular, and I know that little pieces of you are embedded in this, and I can tell that from all the prose about, or the short story about Alexandria, or the prose, and so I just wanted to appreciate everyone here. That's number one. Number two, my name is Justine Thoren, and I wrote a short creative story on a bus driver, a 60-year-old bus driver, and his life encompassing the last 2 decades. And in focus, or in particular, the way in which he focuses on 3 different lives. Now, it was inspired by kind of my own personality, and that of which kind of, we all are kind of, to an extent, have multiple personalities in ourselves. So I kind of embedded that into the different characters, and so you'll see that when I read a little bit of my excerpt. But what I'll do for you today is read a little bit, and then introduce you to a character, and then also, followingly, introduce you to the end of this character. Through my near 6 decades of life, I've come to understand that contentment is the center of our perceived happiness, imitating a paved way that we should pursue at its center, all whilst happiness encompasses the periodical stops along the way. An extremity of any form should not be the end goal of life. At its core, no one should be able to feel sad all the time, and this in response leads to the singular fact that no one should aim towards utter and eternal happiness, but should instead learn to positively influence one's surrounding environment and constantly allow the purest version of one's soul to prosper. Thrive under the periodical happiness of others, and over time, the threshold of purity delves deeper into being and your own being, and it settles. Contentment will prevail. As I lay in bed, thinking of all the people I've encountered throughout my lifetime, I begin to question this ideology. This adopted ideology was so deeply ingrained in my being, it began to eat away at my own person. Who was I without the happiness of others? If their happiness was fleeting, and it was, what was the meaning of exerting this effort and inducing it when they would be consumed by sadness once more? Have I been so consumed by watching others, learning from them, that I neglected my own pursuit and instead settled for what I now deem as insignificant and meaningless? With every negative thought, my body gets colder and I burrow further into the thick winter sheets. Seasonal depression, a midlife crisis. That's all that it is, isn't it? I sit up, projecting the way in which I'm slowly disintegrating into nothingness within my mind, and decide to leave my house for the first time in a few days. I wear 4 layers of clothing, each layer thicker than the last, as an attempt, as a shield, each to block out the crisp cold of the winter. But deep down, I know it won't be enough. Nothing can stop the ice that runs through my veins, stemming from my mind and traveling down every inch of my bones. As I walk along the slow and paved way, my new phone sitting at the bottom of my front pockets, I think of contentment again. Should I have aimed for personal happiness? Should I have done more for myself? And if I had, would I have had a real wife and kids instead of the imaginary ones that periodically disappeared and reappeared with every stop? My body shape. Now this is all in the mind of the main character, but we do encompass, or we do see other characters, such as, I'll give you a brief about Matthew, or Michael actually. So I snapped out of yesterday's reverence and transported back to today, adjusting my name tag as I drove to my first bus stop. I mentally recounted through all of the possible passengers of today, the regulars I had watched grow up throughout the last decade. Michael steps in, along with a rush of 15 other individuals, with his phone in his ear and his tie off kilter. He encompasses the stereotypical version of a businessman, struggling to make a name for himself, and he has done so for the last 25 years. I stop the urge that buds inside me every time I lay eyes on him, the urge to shake him vigorously and yell at him to snap out of his capitalism-induced obsession that has slowly ate at his insanity, and as I've watched. There is no mercy, no time to waste when you're in the business world. Get it done in the next 4 hours or your job will be on the line. That sentence alone, spoken by Michael himself, was enough to realize that he was too far gone. He would not appreciate an old man's wisdom, perhaps using it as fuel to his invisible fire, and further immerse himself within his pursuit. He hadn't appreciated when I spoke to him at 25, and he wouldn't if I spoke to him now, the wrinkles on his face confessing his 35 years of life. Oh, Michael, there's more for you than simply making money. Please, please do not get consumed. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, all of you, for attending. And please have some refreshment. And you can maybe socialize with the winners, the awardees, if they don't have a class. Many of us have a class or two and you have to leave and so on. So please help yourself. Thanks again. Thanks again.